August 12 B.C., an altar was erected to Augustus Caesar in Gaul, and he was made a god of the Roman Empire. That was the most outstanding event of the year, although it was an eventful 12 months for the entire family. In the first place, Agrippa had died. Julia was again a widow, and now she had 4 children, and a fifth was soon to be born. Gaius and Lucius, the 2 small boys who were now 6 and 8, had been adopted by their grandfather as his heirs. He adored them, and was also fond of their little sisters, Julia and Agrippina. As for Julia herself, she was still young and lively, and, Augustus thought, needed another husband to look after her. Casting about for a suitable third son-in-law, Augustus chose his elder stepson. This was a blow to Tiberius. He had never cared for Julia. He was already married, truly in love with his wife, and most reluctant to divorce her. But he was obliged to comply with the request of Augustus. Tiberius and Julia were wed. The marriage was to go fairly well for a short time, but Tiberius was too sober and silent for the lively Julia. While he was away in one of the provinces, she found wild companions and more exciting lovers, and began to seek pleasure in ways that were eventually to lead to a tragic end. Drusus, Livia's second son, the younger brother of Tiberius, was now married to Antonia, the gentle daughter of Octavia and Antony. Ruddy and full of enthusiasm as ever, he came back for his brother's wedding from the border of Germany. His boyhood dream of crossing the Rhine into German territory had now been realized. Each year for the past 3 years, Drusus had led an expedition into the deep German forest. He had also been in charge of building fortifications along the Rhine as a protection against the German tribes, who had again invaded Gaul and crucified Roman citizens. Pushing through the morasses and marshes in the north, he had dug a canal from the Rhine through the Zuyder Zee into the North Sea. Now, this year of 12 B.C., Drusus was made governor of Gaul, and he and Antonia went to live in Lyons, which was the Romans' capital. It was an old town of the Gauls, and a great meeting place of the tribes. There every spring the Druid priest had held court, judging and settling all disputes that had arisen among the people, divining the will of the gods, and offering sacrifices. The power of the Druids had now been broken, their rule replaced by Roman law, and those Gauls who had become Roman citizens forbidden to take part in the old sacrifices. As a substitute, the Gauls were now given a new god to worship, Augustus, the Emperor of Rome, Augustus Divus or Divus. Divus is a Latin word meaning godlike or divine. The first altar to him was built by Drusus at Lyons. On the first day of August of 12 B.C., it was solemnly unveiled. Delegates from 60 of the old Gallic tribes were present for the ceremony. A priest was ordained high priest of Rome and Augustus, and from then on the 1st of August, pilgrims were to come here each year from everywhere in Gaul to worship at that altar. Similar altars were also erected in many other towns of Gaul. On one of them the following inscription was engraved: "The people of the city have dedicated this altar to the divine Augustus, and have vowed him an annual feast forever. May this be to the honor and glory of the Emperor Caesar Augustus, son of the divine Julius, father of our country, sovereign pontiff, and to the honor and glory of his wife and children, and of the Senate and the Roman people, and of this town, which dedicates and devotes itself forever to the worship of his divinity." This declaring Augustus a god did not mean there was any thought of him as God, creator of the universe. Making him a god was more like making him a saint in the Roman Catholic Church. He was patron saint of the Roman Empire. The change grew more or less reasonably out of the old Roman religion. When the death of the former high priest left that office vacant, Augustus had become Pontifex Maximus. There had always been a law that the Pontifex Maximus must live in a public residence, but Augustus did not care to move into the one provided for the other high priest, so he presented part of his palace to the state, that it might be considered a public residence. His hearth fire was then looked upon as a public hearth fire, as sacred and important as the one in the temple of Vesta. His lares and penates also became those of the state, and as in every Roman household the genius or guiding spirit of the family father had been worshipped, it did not seem strange for the genius of Augustus to be worshipped as the guiding spirit of the empire. Although Augustus allowed no altars to be built to him in the city of Rome, altars for his worship were built in all the army camps and also in all the provinces of the East, where it was a long established custom to bow down before kings and rulers as being gods on earth. In all his world, one people only refused to worship at his altars, and they were the Jews. They would pray for him if they must, but they would not pray to him. Proud and intense in their obedience to the law of Moses, they worshipped but one God, Yahweh, God of their nation, and they would have no other gods before him. Everywhere else, in every great city of his empire, temples and shrines were erected for his worship. Natives of every subject land from the Euphrates River to the Rhine added him to their other gods and offered prayers to him, and in this one act the empire was united. Thus it was that Augustus Caesar, supreme magistrate of the Roman Empire and its first emperor, also became its god, Augustus Divus.